"Please split the bill," my boyfriend said to the waiter. "We're not really together." The waiter froze. I watched his eyes flick from my boyfriend's face to mine, confusion tightening his expression as he waited for my reaction. The restaurant around us kept moving, cutlery clinking, low conversations blending into soft music, but our table went completely still, like the air had been sucked out of it. I felt heat rise up my neck, a familiar burn of humiliation. But I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't laugh it off. I didn't ask him what he meant. I just nodded once. "Sure," I said evenly. "Split it." That was it. No scene, no raised voice, no tears. But what I did next, quietly, after we left that restaurant, is what stopped everything. I'm 34 years old. I've been dating my boyfriend for 2.5 years. We met through mutual friends at a birthday party. The kind of night that feels forgettable until you realize later it changed your life. We didn't rush into things. We started seeing each other regularly, then more seriously. Weekend stays turned into routines. Conversations about moving in together started to feel inevitable, normal, safe, or so I thought. That Friday night was supposed to be just another date, an upscale Italian place downtown. My choice. I'd been trying to get a reservation there for months. We'd had a decent week, no big fights, no obvious tension. When I picked him up, he seemed normal, talkative, engaged. He told me about a project at work he was excited about. I listened, smiling, thinking this was just another step forward. We ordered appetizers, wine, entrees. We talked about concerts next month, about weekend plans, about nothing and everything the way couples do when they assume they're on the same page. Then something shifted. He started checking his phone more often. His answers shortened. His tone cooled, just enough to feel it, but not enough to call it out without sounding paranoid. When I asked if everything was okay, he brushed it off. "Just work stuff," he said. "You know how it is." I let it go. I always did. When the waiter came back with the bill and my boyfriend said we weren't really together, I realized something in real time. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about splitting a check. This was about how he saw me. And the way he chose to tell me, in public, through a stranger, without warning, told me everything I needed to know. I didn't know it yet, but that sentence would unravel the last 2.5 years of my life. And I would never look at him the same way again. I was 34 when that dinner happened, but our story started long before that sentence ever left his mouth. We met 2.5 years earlier at a mutual friend's birthday party, the kind where people drift between conversations, holding plastic cups, half listening to music that's too loud. I remember noticing him because he wasn't trying to dominate the room. He stood off to the side, laughing easily, stepping in only when he had something genuine to add. That felt familiar to me, comfortable. I worked in software development. Long hours, structured thinking, a life built on solving problems logically. He worked in digital marketing, creative, fast-paced, always talking about campaigns and metrics and how quickly things changed in his world. We were different in ways that felt complementary. Where I was steady, he was expressive. Where I was reserved, he was charming. We started seeing each other casually, then regularly, then inevitably. Texts turned into long calls. Calls turned into weekends spent together. We didn't rush moving in, but we spent most Fridays through Sundays at each other's places. My apartment slowly learned his habits. His apartment learned mine. Toothbrushes appeared. Extra clothes stayed just in case. We talked about moving in together soon, the way couples do when they assume time is on their side. For a long while, things felt balanced. We split expenses on trips, took turns paying for dinners, supported each other's work stress. He came to my company events. I showed up to his launches and celebrations. From the outside, we looked solid. From the inside, I believed we were too. But there were signs, small ones, easy to explain away. He was increasingly glued to his phone, even during moments that used to belong to us. Dinners, movie nights, lazy Sunday mornings. If I asked about it, he'd say it was work. Campaigns didn't stop. Clients didn't wait. I accepted that explanation because it made sense, and because questioning it felt like mistrust. He had a way of minimizing tension. If I brought up feeling disconnected, he'd say I was overthinking. If I asked for more intentional time, he'd remind me how busy we both were. "This is just adulthood," he'd say. "It's not like we're 20 anymore." I wanted to be reasonable, mature, understanding, so I adjusted. His family liked me, at least on the surface. His mother was polite, warm in that careful way. His friends treated me like a permanent fixture, someone who would always be there. That reinforced the illusion. People don't do that when a relationship is fragile, or so I thought. Looking back, I realize how much I relied on momentum. We'd been together long enough that I assumed commitment was implied. We talked about the future in abstract terms. Someday. Eventually. Nothing concrete, nothing promised, but enough to keep me invested. The truth is, I didn't see myself as someone who would tolerate ambiguity for this long. I believed clarity mattered, respect mattered, partnership mattered. But somewhere along the way, I started confusing familiarity with security. By the time that Friday night arrived, I thought we were in a settled place. Not perfect, but real. Not dramatic, but committed. I didn't walk into that restaurant expecting a turning point. I expected pasta, wine, conversation, and maybe plans for the next weekend. I didn't know I was about to learn, in the most public way possible, that we were not standing on the same ground at all. When I look back now, the signs weren't dramatic. They weren't explosive. That's what made them so easy to ignore. The relationship didn't feel like it was falling apart. It felt like it was slowly thinning, stretching, in quiet places I didn't know how to name at the time. The first change was attention. Not that he stopped listening completely, but the quality shifted. Conversations that used to feel shared started to feel parallel. I would be talking, and his eyes would flick down to his phone. A quick glance at first, then longer pauses, then moments where I realized he hadn't heard the last sentence I said. Sorry, he'd say, tapping the screen. Work. Digital marketing didn't sleep. Campaigns ran constantly. Clients expected immediate responses. That explanation made sense, so I accepted it. I told myself this was what supporting your partner looked like, understanding their stress, giving them grace. Then came the emotional distance. He was still physically present, still spending weekends with me, still showing up to dinners and events, but something was missing in the in-between moments. Less curiosity, less checking in. When I asked how he was feeling, the answers became shorter, more surface level. When I talked about my own stress, he listened politely, but didn't lean in the way he used to. I started noticing how often I was the one initiating plans, the one suggesting dates, the one asking about the future. He never shut those conversations down, but he also never pushed them forward. Everything stayed vague. Yeah, that could be nice. We'll see. Eventually. His friends didn't help. A few of them joked about how intense his job was, how he was married to work. They said it like a compliment, like something I should be proud of. When I mentioned feeling a little disconnected, one of them laughed and said, "That's just how he is. Don't take it personally." So I didn't, or at least I tried not to. There were moments that sat wrong with me, moments I replayed later, like how he'd sometimes refer to me casually as someone he was seeing when talking to new people instead of my girlfriend, or how he'd brush off questions about moving in with a joke. "You just want to steal my closet space," he'd say, smiling. I laughed along. I didn't want to be the woman who pushed for labels or timelines. We were adults. We'd been together for 2.5 years. Surely those things didn't need to be said out loud anymore. But beneath all of that was a growing sense of imbalance. I felt invested. He felt comfortable. And comfort, I was learning, isn't the same thing as commitment. I told myself every relationship goes through phases, that not every concern needed to become a confrontation, that choosing peace sometimes meant choosing patience. What I didn't realize was that by constantly smoothing things over, I was teaching him something too. That I would adapt, that I would wait, that I would stay quiet even when something felt off. By the time we walked into that Italian restaurant on Friday night, the conflict had already been planted. I just didn't know it yet. And neither did he. That Friday night didn't feel loaded when it began. It felt ordinary in the best way. I'd finally gotten a reservation at the Italian place downtown I'd been talking about for months. Candlelight, white tablecloths, the kind of room that makes you lower your voice without realizing it. When I picked him up, he slid into the passenger seat easily, kissed my cheek, and launched into a story about a project he was excited about. I listened, nodding, smiling, thinking this was what stability looked like. Normal date night energy, nothing to brace for. We ordered appetizers and a bottle of wine. The waiter joked about the menu. We talked about a concert he wanted to go to next month. Tickets, schedules, little plans that made the future feel assumed. When the appetizers came, everything still felt fine. Then, somewhere between the first bite of pasta and the second glass of wine, his tone shifted. Subtle at first. He started checking his phone. Once. Twice. Then every few minutes. I tried to ignore it, told myself not to be that person who polices screens. But the checking didn't stop. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting my fork down. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Just work stuff. Friday nights don't mean much in digital marketing. Campaigns don't stop." He smiled like that explained everything. I nodded and picked my fork back up. I didn't push. I didn't want to turn a nice dinner into an interrogation. But the air changed. Conversation thinned out. Silence crept in where there used to be easy back and forth. We finished our entrees mostly quiet, the way people do when they're distracted but pretending not to be. When the waiter came back to clear plates, he asked if we wanted dessert or the check. Before I could answer, my boyfriend spoke. "Just the check, please." The waiter nodded and disappeared. I took a sip of wine and watched my boyfriend scroll. 5 minutes later, the waiter returned and set the leather billfold on the table between us. My boyfriend reached for it immediately, opened it, glanced at the total. Then he looked up at the waiter and said clearly without hesitation, "Please split the bill. We're not really together." The restaurant didn't go silent. Other tables kept talking. Glasses clinked. Music played. But our table felt like it had dropped into a vacuum. The waiter froze, pen hovering over his pad. His eyes flicked to me, uncertain, asking without words if that was true. I felt heat rush up my neck. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with something colder. Embarrassment mixed with disbelief. I kept my face neutral. I didn't look at my boyfriend. I nodded once. "Sure," I said evenly. "Split it." The waiter exhaled like he'd been holding his breath, took both our cards, and retreated quickly. I sat there with my hands folded, staring at the table, waiting for the moment to pass. "We're not really together," I repeated quietly, finally looking at him. "That's interesting phrasing." He shrugged. "I meant financially. We split things, that's all." "You didn't say separate checks," I replied. "You didn't say split it down the middle. You said we're not really together." "Can we not do this here?" he said, irritation creeping into his voice. "Do what?" I asked. "React to my boyfriend publicly announcing we're not together?" "You're the one who made it public. I'm sitting here calmly." The waiter returned with 2 receipts and 2 pens. We signed separately. I tipped 20%. He didn't deserve to be caught in whatever this was. My boyfriend tipped his usual 15. We stood, and I followed him out into the cool night air. On the sidewalk, he turned to me. "Are you going to drive me home, or are you going to pout all night?" "I'm going to drive you home," I said, "and we're going to talk." We got into the car. I started the engine, but didn't put it in gear. I just sat there, hands on the wheel. "What was that?" I asked. "What was what?" "Don't play dumb. You told a stranger we're not together, in front of me." He exhaled sharply. "Fine. You want the truth? I've been thinking about this for a while. About us. About whether this is actually working." My grip tightened. "And you decided to announce that to a waiter?" "It just came out," he said. "I've been feeling disconnected, like we're going through the motions. So instead of communicating that, you humiliated me in public." "It wasn't meant to humiliate you." "Then what was it meant to do?" He didn't answer. The drive to his apartment felt endless. When we pulled up, he reached for the door. "I think we need some space," he said, "to figure out what we want." "I know what I want," I replied. "I want a partner who doesn't tell strangers we're not together." "You're being dramatic. I'm being honest." He got out and closed the door. I watched him walk into his building, then drove home and sat in my car for 20 minutes, replaying the night, the tone, the casualness, the certainty in his voice. When I finally went inside, I did one quiet thing that changed everything. I opened my laptop, logged into my phone carrier account, and removed him from my family plan. We'd shared it for over a year because it made sense as a couple. We weren't really together, so I made my life match his words. Then I went to bed. Saturday morning came quietly, too quietly. Sunlight crept through the blinds like nothing had happened, like the world hadn't tilted the night before. My phone buzzed on the nightstand just after 9. His name lit up the screen. I let it ring. It stopped, rang again, stopped. The 3rd time, I answered. "What did you do?" he demanded. No greeting, no pause. "Good morning to you, too," I said, keeping my voice level. "My phone service changed," he said. "I got a notification saying I'm on my own plan now." "Yes," I replied. "Since we're not really together, it didn't make sense to keep sharing a family plan." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "Are you serious right now?" "Completely. You're doing this to punish me. I'm doing this because you told a stranger we're not together, I said. I'm taking you at your word. I said I needed space. And you said we're not really together, I answered. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. He hung up. I made coffee. The familiar routine steadied me. I went for a run, let the rhythm of my breath drown out the replay of his voice, the waiter's hesitation, the way the sentence landed like it had been waiting to be said. When I got back, my phone was full of messages. Anger first, then justification, then a creeping edge of panic. You're overreacting. I was stressed last night. Can we please talk about this like adults? I responded once, only once. We can talk when you're ready to explain what you meant by not really together. Until then, we're not really together. The messages stopped. On Sunday, there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole. He stood there with coffee and pastries from the bakery I liked, holding the bag up like a peace offering. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Peace offering, he said, forcing a smile. I'm listening, I replied. Can I come in? I'm fine talking here. His smile slipped. He lowered the bag. You're really going to make this difficult? You made it difficult Friday night, I said. I'm just following through. I made a mistake, he said quickly. I was stressed. About work. About us. It came out wrong. It came out how you felt, I said. Stress doesn't invent thoughts. It reveals them. He rubbed his face. I don't want to break up over this. Who said anything about breaking up? I asked evenly. We're just not really together, remember? Stop throwing that in my face. Why? I asked. You said it, in public, to a waiter, in front of me. I apologized. You showed up with coffee and said it came out wrong, I said. That's not an apology. That's damage control. He set the bag down on my doorstep. What do you want from me? I want to understand why that was your instinct, I said. Why saying we're not together felt easier than talking to me? He hesitated, then finally said, Sometimes it feels like we're roommates who sleep together, not partners. We work all week, see each other on weekends, and call it a relationship. So you've been feeling this way for a while, I said. Yes. And you never said anything, I added. I didn't know how, he said. Friday night, it just happened. I'm sorry. It was a real apology this time. I could hear it. But it didn't erase the fact that the thought had lived in him long before that dinner. I need time, I said. How much? However long it takes. He nodded, picked up the bag, then paused. Are you seeing anyone else? What? Are you talking to someone else? He asked. Is that why you're being so cold? I'm being cold because my boyfriend told a stranger we're not together, I said. There's no one else. There's barely an us right now. He left. I closed the door, brought the coffee and pastries inside, and set them on the counter. I didn't eat them. I just stood there, thinking about the last 2.5 years and how easily words can redraw reality. By Monday, I still hadn't decided what this meant. I only knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to pretend that sentence hadn't happened. Monday came with a weight I couldn't shake. I sat at my desk, code open on one screen, unread messages blinking on the other, and realized I was replaying Friday night on a loop. The cadence of his voice, the way he didn't hesitate, the waiter's pause, my own stillness. I kept thinking I should have said something right there, should have stood up, should have walked out. Instead, I'd stayed, paid half a bill for a meal I barely tasted, and gone home to clean up the consequences alone. Around lunchtime, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. Hello? Hi, this is going to sound strange, a young voice said, hesitant. I was your waiter Friday night, at the Italian place. My stomach tightened. Okay. I know this is unprofessional, he continued, rushing, but I found your number on the receipt in our reservation system. I felt awful about what happened. The way he said that, I could see it hit you. There's something you should know. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. What is it? She came back Saturday night, he said. Same table, different guy. The room felt suddenly smaller. What? They seemed familiar, he added gently. Ordered the same wine. She was laughing, touching his arm. I didn't know your situation, but it didn't feel right not to tell you. Did she recognize you? I asked. Oh, yeah, he said. She looked uncomfortable for a few seconds, then acted like Friday never happened, left a big tip. I thanked him. He apologized again. Then the call ended, leaving me staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my monitor. Less than 24 hours. Saturday night, while I was trying to decide whether 2.5 years meant anything, he was back at the same restaurant with someone else. The phone in my hand felt heavier. I called him. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I texted. We need to talk. Now. No response. I finished the day on autopilot and drove to his apartment. His car was there. I buzzed his unit. No answer. Buzzed again. Still nothing. I called from the lobby. "What?" he snapped when he finally answered. "I'm downstairs. Buzz me up." "I'm busy." "If you don't buzz me up, I'm buzzing every unit until someone lets me in." 30 seconds later, the door clicked. I took the elevator, walked down the hall, and found his door already open. He stood there in yoga pants and a sweatshirt, arms crossed, like this was an inconvenience. "What's so urgent?" he asked. "You were at the restaurant Saturday with someone else," I said. His face went pale. "Who told you that?" "Doesn't matter," I replied. "Is it true?" "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." "He's a coworker," he said quickly. "We had a work lunch that ran late." "At 8 on a Saturday night?" I asked. "With wine? At the same place we went?" "You're having me followed now?" he shot back. "That's insane." "The waiter called me," I said. "He thought I should know." He laughed, sharp and forced. "The waiter called you? That's harassment." "Stop deflecting," I said. "Who is he?" Silence. His eyes dropped. That was answer enough. "How long?" I asked. "Nothing happened," he said. "How long have you been seeing him?" "We're friends," he insisted. "We work together." "Friends don't humiliate their partners in public," I said. "Friends don't make it easier to pretend they're single." "You're twisting this." "I'm stating facts," I replied. "You said we're not really together. Less than a day later, you're on a date at the same restaurant. Were you planning to tell me, or were you just going to keep needing space until I figured it out?" Tears finally came. "I didn't plan any of this," he whispered. "Things just happened." "Things don't just happen," I said quietly. "You chose to get close to him. You chose to say what you said Friday. You chose to go back Saturday. What do you want me to say?" "I want you to admit it," I said. "Stop pretending this is about space. You found someone else." He looked at me for a long moment. Then, finally, "Yes, I've been talking to him. We got close. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." "And Friday?" I asked. "I realized I couldn't keep pretending with you," he said. "Pretending I still wanted this." There it was. The truth, stripped of excuses. "Then why not just break up with me?" I asked. "Why humiliate me? Why show up with apology coffee?" "Because I wasn't sure," he said. "I didn't want to throw away 2.5 years over a crush." "It's not a crush anymore," I said. "No," he admitted. "It's not." I nodded once. "Okay, thank you for finally being honest." I turned to leave. "That's it?" he called after me. "You're not even going to fight for this?" I stopped and looked back. "You told a stranger we're not together. Then you went on a date with someone else. What exactly am I supposed to fight for?" He didn't answer. I walked out, the hallway swallowing the sound of my footsteps. That week was brutal. I buried myself in work, avoided mutual friends, changed my locks, canceled shared subscriptions, quietly removed him from my emergency contacts. About 2 weeks later, a mutual friend called to tell me he'd been spreading a different story, how I'd accused him without proof and ended things suddenly. I didn't correct him publicly. The people who mattered would see the truth. The rest could keep the noise. 3 weeks after the restaurant, he showed up at my door again. I didn't open it at first. When I finally did, the chain stayed on. "It didn't work out with him," he said through the gap. "I made a mistake. I want to try again. Do it right this time." "There's no right way to come back from this," I said. "You kept me as a backup while you explored something else." "I love you," he cried. "You love the safety of having me," I replied. "That's not the same." We stood there in silence. Then I closed the door. By the end of that night, I understood something I hadn't before. The escalation wasn't about anger or jealousy. It was about clarity, demanding to be acknowledged. The darkest moment didn't come when I found out about the other man. It didn't come when he admitted he no longer wanted us. And it didn't even come when I closed the door in his face. It came afterward, in the stillness. That night, my apartment felt unfamiliar, like I was standing in a place that no longer recognized me. I sat on the edge of my bed, fully dressed, shoes still on, staring at the wall across from me. My chest felt hollow, not shattered, not dramatic, just emptied out. The kind of emptiness that doesn't cry or scream, it just exists. I kept replaying the restaurant moment in my head. The way he said it so casually. "We're not really together." Not whispered, not explained, announced. I thought about how long that sentence must have been forming in him before it ever reached the waiter's ears. How many times he'd rehearsed distancing himself internally while still sleeping next to me, still talking about concerts and future plans. How many times I'd felt something was off and talked myself out of trusting that instinct. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself, Because it meant I had been slowly abandoning my own intuition to keep the relationship intact. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and realized my hands were shaking. I hadn't eaten dinner. I hadn't eaten much all day. Food felt irrelevant, like something that belonged to a different version of me. I leaned against the counter and let the weight of the last 2.5 years settle fully. I wasn't angry. I was grieving the version of the relationship I thought I had, the partnership I believed we were building, the future I'd been quietly organizing my life around. What broke me wasn't that he liked someone else. It was that he chose humiliation over honesty, silence over communication, convenience over respect. I lay down on the bed without changing clothes and stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. At some point, tears came, slow and quiet, sliding into my hairline and soaking the pillow. Not sobs, just release. The kind that comes when your body finally understands what your mind has been trying to deny. I asked myself questions I'd avoided for months. When did I start accepting less than I needed? When did I stop expecting clarity? Why did I confuse longevity with loyalty? The answer scared me, because I loved him, and loving him had slowly trained me to minimize myself. I realized how easily I could have stayed, how tempting it would have been to forgive, to rationalize, to call this a rough patch and move on. He had already tried. Apology coffee, tears, promises. The familiar rhythm of repair without accountability. If I'd let him back in, this moment would have become a footnote instead of a turning point. And that thought terrified me more than being alone. I got up, opened my laptop, and began making changes. Quiet ones, practical ones. I removed his access to shared accounts, deleted old calendar reminders, archived photos I wasn't ready to look at, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. Each click felt like a small goodbye. That night, I didn't sleep much. My mind kept drifting between memories and realizations, past and present colliding in uncomfortable clarity. But somewhere near dawn, as the city outside started to wake up, something inside me shifted. I wasn't broken. I was awake. And for the first time since that sentence was spoken across the restaurant table, I understood this wasn't the end of something precious. It was the end of pretending. And that meant a turning point was coming, whether he was ready for it or not. The turning point didn't come with a dramatic speech or a public confrontation. It came the morning after everything finally went quiet. No missed calls, no messages, no apology waiting to pull me back into familiar confusion. Just space. And in that space, I could finally hear myself think. I woke up early, the kind of early that happens when your body has been running on adrenaline for days and suddenly doesn't know what to do with the silence. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching people head to work, carrying bags and routines and certainty. For the first time in weeks, I didn't reach for my phone to check if he'd said anything new. Instead, I asked myself a different question. What would it look like if I stopped trying to be understood and simply accepted what I'd been shown? Because the truth was no longer complicated. He didn't accidentally say we weren't really together. He said it because, to him, we weren't. Everything else, the apology coffee, the explanations, the tears, had been about managing the fallout, not correcting the belief. The waiter's phone call hadn't created the problem. It had confirmed it. Later that day, a mutual friend reached out. Someone neutral, someone who wasn't invested in defending either of us. "I heard what happened," she said gently, "and I just want you to know, you're not crazy." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "He's been distant for a while," she continued. "A few of us noticed. The phone, the excuses, the way he talked about you like you were optional. I didn't want to interfere, but when I heard about the restaurant thing, it made sense. That was it, the confirmation I didn't ask for but needed. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't overreacting. I was responding appropriately to disrespect. That afternoon, I made a decision that surprised even me with how calm it felt. I blocked him, not out of anger, out of clarity. I didn't need more explanations. I didn't need more apologies that arrived only after consequences. I didn't need closure delivered in pieces. Closure had already happened. I sent one final message before blocking him. "I'm not interested in continuing this conversation. Please don't contact me again. I'm choosing to move forward." No accusations, no insults, no bargaining. Just a line drawn cleanly, firmly, without shaking hands. When I blocked his number, I expected to feel panic, or grief, or doubt. Instead, I felt something steadier. Relief. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since the dinner. No dreams about the restaurant. No replaying his voice. No imaginary conversations where I tried to say the perfect thing. My body finally understood that the threat was gone. I wasn't losing him. I was regaining myself. And once I saw it that way, there was no going back. The fallout didn't arrive with shouting or confrontation. It arrived quietly, carried through other people's mouths, filtered through fragments of conversations I hadn't asked to hear. Once I blocked him and stopped responding, the story moved on without me. That was the first real consequence he didn't know how to manage. At first, he tried to control the narrative. Mutual friends began reaching out, cautiously, the way people do when they're not sure which version of the truth they're allowed to believe. A few asked directly what had happened. Most danced around it. I kept my answers short and clean. It didn't work out. We wanted different things. I wasn't interested in defending myself. Anyone who needed convincing had already decided where they stood. He, on the other hand, was not quiet. I heard that he'd been telling people I overreacted, that I embarrassed him by making a big deal out of a joke, that I accused him of cheating with no proof and ended things impulsively. It was a familiar pattern. Minimize the action, question the reaction, reframe the harm. For a moment, I considered correcting the story, explaining the restaurant, the waiter's call, the date the next night, the confession in his doorway. But something in me resisted. I had spent too long explaining myself in that relationship. I wasn't going to keep doing it after. What surprised me was how quickly the truth surfaced without my help. A few friends noticed inconsistencies. Why was he at the same restaurant the very next night? Why did his timeline keep shifting? Why did his version never quite line up with what others had seen? One by one, people started reaching their own conclusions. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly stepping back. His family did the same. His mother reached out once, carefully, asking if we could talk. I declined politely. I didn't owe anyone a post-mortem. From what I heard later, she wasn't angry with me. She was disappointed in him. That distinction mattered more than I expected. Meanwhile, my life began to contract and expand at the same time. I lost some friendships that were built on convenience and shared history rather than understanding. And I gained something far more valuable in return: space, time, emotional quiet. I rearranged my apartment, not drastically, just enough to make it feel like mine again. I moved things he'd never liked, bought a chair I'd been eyeing for months, cooked meals without checking whether he'd approve of the menu or timing. Small freedoms, but they added up. I heard, through the same grapevine that delivered everything else, that he and the coworker tried to make it work. 6 weeks, maybe less. Apparently he wasn't ready for commitment. The irony didn't sting. It clarified. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel validated. I felt settled. Watching the consequences unfold didn't bring me satisfaction. It brought me certainty. I hadn't imagined the distance. I hadn't misunderstood the moment. I had simply responded to what was real. And the more distance I put between myself and the situation, the clearer it became. The fallout wasn't my responsibility. It was just the echo of a choice he had already made. It's been 4 months since that dinner. 4 months since a single sentence reframed 2.5 years of my life. I'm not counting the days anymore. I don't replay the scene like a reflex. The memory is still there, but it's lost its grip. It sits quietly now, like a lesson filed away, instead of a wound that keeps reopening. I'm doing better than okay. I go to the gym regularly, not to distract myself, but because my body feels like it belongs to me again. I picked up hobbies I'd slowly abandoned while trying to keep a relationship balanced on one side. I have more free time, more mental space, and fewer conversations where I'm trying to decode someone else's distance. The quiet is honest. It doesn't promise anything it can't deliver. The mutual friend who called me did set the record straight with our group. Most people reached out afterward, some apologizing for believing his version without asking questions. A few took his side, said I should have tried harder, should have been more understanding. I let those friendships go without a fight. If they couldn't see the manipulation in what happened, we weren't as aligned as I thought. I heard that he and the coworker tried to make it work for about 6 weeks. It ended badly. Apparently, he wasn't ready for commitment. I didn't feel vindicated when I found out. I felt relieved that I hadn't stayed long enough to keep paying the price for his uncertainty. The waiter, the unexpected witness in all of this, became an unlikely point of clarity. We got coffee once, just to talk it through. He told me he'd never called a customer like that before, but something about the situation felt wrong. He'd seen the dynamic, recognized it, felt like I deserved to know. I thanked him, bought him dinner at a different restaurant. We're not friends exactly, but we're friendly. Sometimes the people who show up when you're being quietly disrespected aren't the ones you expect. I've been on a few dates since then, nothing serious. I'm taking my time. I'm choosing people who are clear about wanting to be there, not people who keep one foot out the door while asking me to stay steady. People sometimes ask if I regret how I handled it. The silence, the phone plan, the refusal to argue. I don't. Because the truth is, I didn't end the relationship. He did. He just did it in a way that allowed him to pretend it wasn't final until he realized there were consequences. Words matter, especially the ones spoken without thinking, especially the ones said in public. The stressed, unguarded version of a person is often the most honest one. That night, he told a stranger we weren't really together. I believed him, and I adjusted my life accordingly. The bill was split evenly, the relationship split for good. And somewhere in that quiet response, I learned something I won't forget. The calmest reaction is often the strongest one. You don't have to raise your voice to draw a line. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is accept the truth the first time it's offered.